Welcome back to another Divorce Workshop Talk. I'm Karen, and we're inviting Vera on, who's a life coach. She's going to talk to us about creating self-trust, which is a big topic. And go to our webpage, www.divorceworkshop.ca. Hi, Vera.
Hi, Karen. Can you see me okay? Hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good. I think I'm a little high, but that's okay.
I never quite know on these IG lives how to set up my camera. So
That's okay. Okay. Anyways, before we get started, I'll just go taller. Give a brief intro about yourself, and I'm so thrilled you're on.
yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on here. I'm just gonna make this a little bit louder so I can hear you. Yeah, my name is Vera Ilnyckyj, and I'm a life coach, and I primarily work with women who have gone through some major life change, including a divorce. And I've been there, and it's such an important time to receive support, which is, why I love the work that you do and why I feel so fulfilled and grateful to be able to do the work that I do with women and men as well. Because it can be it is a very stressful time to go through. And I find that kind of at the end of the sort of that critical period of maybe all the paperwork's in place and you kind of have things settled out, then people start thinking, oh my goodness, like what's next? Like how did I even end up here? And I really don't know where to turn to. And that's where I really enjoy helping people at that stage.
Yeah, it was funny when you brought up the subject of creating self-trust. I said, this is a good topic because for me, personal story, even when I was in my marriage, I was losing my trust in myself. And I think that's very common. And then when you having to, sway back and forth and making that tough decision, and then the divorce process and all these things coming at you and learning to trust yourself again. So I suspect that takes quite a while for some people. It did for me. I don't know. You work in that. So what do you see?
Yeah, it is a process, right? Because I know for me, for my personal story, it happened so gradually that I didn't even realize it was happening until all of a sudden I was like, how did I end up here? I don't even know what I want. I don't know what the truth is, right? I just know that I'm not happy, and I know that I'm in a situation now where I'm getting divorced. I'm going through all the motions of that, but I don't even know who I am anymore. And I was really questioning that. And I was really questioning, how did I get here? Like, again, I was really berating myself. Like, I'm a smart, well-educated, independent woman, right? And then I let this happen to me. Like, I let myself lose connection with myself. And that really is what self-trust is. It's that connection with your intuition, that connection with your inner wisdom, that knowing that you can really listen to yourself and follow what it is that's most important to you. And I find when you're in a marriage that isn't supportive of that, so wherever people are coming from, whether it's a really toxic relationship or whether it's just not the right fit relationship or whether it's an abusive relationship or a combination of all those, we lose touch with ourselves. Because I know for me, I just wanted to make it work so much that in my mind, I'm like, this requires a compromise, which really became a sacrifice of who it is that I was. And then I started slowly just disconnecting from what was most important to me. I started disconnecting from my friends. I started disconnecting from my community, from my family, from what I really wanted to do. And I started questioning everything. And so then when the divorce happened, I was really questioning, like, again, how did this happen? And I don't even know where to start because I've lost touch with myself. I felt so far removed. And I think that's the process that takes time, because it's coming back to ourselves, right? It's realizing who it is that we are, and it's finding the path back to ourselves. And that's the process. And yeah, it can take time, right? There's no set timeline for anybody what that process looks like. But it's definitely a process. It's definitely a journey of self-discovery. And it's not easy. You know that, right? It's not an easy journey because we need to really look at ourselves and be really honest with the role that we played in
Mm-hmm.
where we got to, right? Like we're like, again, we have the control, but we need to be really honest with ourselves. How did I let myself get to this place? Not from a place of judgment, which was where I was coming from, but really from a place of, okay, let's look at this and what are the lessons here and what can I do to start moving forward in my life?
Yeah, and I would think, when you're talking, I think about how vulnerable that is, right? To kind of really look inward and think. I'm also thinking too, in my field too, there's also what we're describing as kind of rebuilding your life once that foundation is gone. And that takes a lot, right? And it's not, we talk a lot in divorce. It's like, okay, the house, the finances and everything. And that's a huge component, but we also have to think of all the internal work that happens. And I
Yeah.
think that's what this subject is about today. It's a lot of internal work. It was for me. It sounds like it was for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's an internal process. And you're right. I mean, when we're going through the divorce, it's all, we go to the sort of the tactical
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? We need the paperwork, we need the kids looked after, we need to have our finances looked after. Like we're looking after all of those really important pieces, but they're really the external pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I going to live, right? Those types of things, which are obviously super critical
Mm-hmm.
and we need to figure those things out. But that's what I'm saying. When those things are kind of settled out and you're feeling like, okay, that's feeling a little bit, a little bit less
Mm-hmm.
rocky, then comes the time of like, okay, now I need to look inwards and really think about, well, what is it that I want? How did I get here? How do I move forward? Right? All of those things. And I think that can be really scary and it can be very vulnerable because, like I said, you need to be really honest with yourself. And I think that's the hard part because I know for me, I was always, when I looked at people out when they were having divorces before I went through my own divorce, I was like, I don't understand how people can
Mm-hmm.
get so bitter. And I don't understand how people can get so, mean to each other. Like, you kind of judge people. Like, how could that happen? And then when I was going through my divorce, I realized, oh my goodness, like I'm feeling myself getting pulled into that really negative, bitter
Mm-hmm.
energy, that resentful energy. And I was like, oh, I can see how people can get sucked into that. And it's really, it's a decision to make. I remember that day that I made a decision, like, I don't want to be a bitter person. I don't want to wake up feeling miserable. But it's hard because it's easy to blame. It's like, right? It's easy to
Mm-hmm.
say, I can't believe what a such and such my ex spouse was, right? Or it's all of his or her fault. Like, look at everything that they did to me. And while that may be true that there was things that were happening to you, it's also important to remember, but I also let that happen
Mm-hmm.
and I need to take responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for that. And for me, it was tough to come to that conclusion, but it was also super empowering. So I'm like, okay, well, I made this decision to be in this relationship, right? I made the decision to disconnect from my family and friends. I was the one that disconnected from myself. Like no one said you have to disconnect from your intuition or you need to not follow what it is that your heart wants to
Mm-hmm.
do, right? Like I decided to do that. And I decided to do that even before I got married, right? Like I knew deep down before I got married that this wasn't the right decision for me. And yet I still made the decision, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, take responsibility for making the decision and then decide. I need to decide I'm not going to be bitter. I don't want to be miserable, right? I had to make that decision every day that I wanted to be the type of person that would get up, be optimistic, take control, right? Learn about myself, figure things out, and have that kind of hopeful, optimistic outlook. Like that was something that I really decided very
Mm-hmm.
intentionally because I didn't want to be mired in that really negative space, those negative emotions.
Yeah, and I think it's good to think differently as well. Like what you're saying is like when you can self-reflect, when you're in that place, you're able to say, yeah, I married this person, right? Even
Mhm.
though you knew, and I was the same way, that it probably wasn't going to be the right decision, we still went ahead and did it, right? We have this thing in the workbook, are just separated, where it's like one is the responsibility pie, like you say, because even if it's only 10%, there's still a bit of responsibility, right? And then the other one is the cards you were dealt with, because as you said, like maybe you weren't really responsible for a lot of it, but this is the person you were married to. So I really love the fact that you're saying, I didn't want to get involved with always being angry or being attracted to that anger, which I find that some of the divorce world is. They're all, you know, they like some of those Facebook groups and stuff, they seem to be, they feed off a lot of that. And some of it's healthy because you need to let it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's also really good.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that it's a choice. It's not an easy choice, because I've wanted to get in there and get really angry too. And some of my stuff is valid, just like most of us. But I do like you say that it's a choice. Do you know how long, like in general, like when you work with people, how long it takes to kind of switch over to that, you know, to starting to try to rebuild? Like, do you have any idea of that?
Well, you know what? I mean, it can be an instant decision in a
Mm-hmm.
way, right? Like once you
Mm-hmm.
get to that point where you're like, I don't really, if you become aware of, I don't want to be where I am right
Mm-hmm.
now, or I become aware, if I feel stuck, right? A lot of women come to me, or men come to me and say like, I don't want to be where I am right now, right? So help me like make that switch. And even just saying that is making the switch, right? Like becoming aware of the fact that you don't want to be where you are is almost that immediate start to doing
Mm-hmm.
something different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't know if you can put a specific timeline on it,
Mm-hmm.
because I think for it's so it's a lot of people go through that stage where they do get kind of like pulled into that anger. And on that note, I mean, and you alluded to that, Karen, like we do need
Mm-hmm.
to, it is a valid emotion. I mean, it's a normal human emotion to
Mm-hmm.
feel angry. And I'm not suggesting that we just push that aside. Like, I think that there's a time that we need to actually explore that anger and then figure out how we're going to release that anger and what we're going to do with it. But
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be in a healthy way. And I think like some of the things that, you were saying, some of these Facebook groups or other things. And I found that too sometimes, right? You'd connect with other women who were getting divorced, and it would just become this kind of bitch fest, right? About like
Mm-hmm.
how terrible our ex-husbands were. We can't believe like how they treated us this way. And it kind of just became this like not a very productive way to deal with
Mm-hmm.
anger and
Mm-hmm.
that emotion. So it's really important to kind of, again, make that you can have the choice of like, okay, I can get pulled into just like being all negative about it and gossipy and berating myself and just saying angry things at the person, or being like, okay, I feel this anger. How can I healthily respond to it? Like, how can I let
Mm-hmm.
it out in a really healthy manner? So whether that's going to counseling, whether that's hiring a coach, whether that's writing letters that you don't
Mm-hmm.
send, right? Or whether that's coming up with some sort of healthy practices around meditation. Like for me, I did a lot. I started doing CrossFit, right? So there's a lot of like physical
Mm-hmm.
things that I started
Mm-hmm.
doing that really helped me get that emotion out of my system, out of my body, so that I could feel empowered to move forward. So it is important to, validate those emotions, but then do something really, really healthy with it. And it can be, like I said, it can be an instant decision, but it also has to be a daily decision.
Yeah.
And at times it's an hourly decision or by the minute decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I remember, and even to this day, I mean, I still have an intention that I set every day, but when I was really in the throes of healing from my divorce, it was like every day, okay, remember, Vera, you are a person that is not bitter, right? Like you're a person who's waking up to be optimistic and taking control of her life and doing something positive today, right? Like I really had to commit to it every single day. And in the moment, sometimes when things happen,
Mm-hmm.
because that resentment, that bitterness, that anger comes up. It's hard when it's hard for it not to, especially when you're like, oh my gosh, I have to pay the lawyer now, or I need to like, do something that's related to my divorce, and it makes me angry. And so it needs to be that, okay, remember you decided to do this. How can we keep that intention? Like, how can we stick with this decision? So it's a daily practice. And that's where having help,
Mm-hmm.
like from a coach like yourself or a coach like me or somebody else, like a group that's really forward moving,
Yeah.
really helps with that. Because then you can
Mm-hmm.
go to that person and be in a really safe space and say, this is how I'm feeling. And that person can help you untangle those thoughts and kind of steer you back into, okay, remember where you want to go, right? Remember how you want to show up in the world. Remember you have a choice in this, right? And you have that support of someone helping you through that.
Yeah. I was thinking, I did a chart while talk for grief a couple of years ago, and we're doing widows and widowers, and I had a lady, and she said to me, she goes, I'm not here because of my death of my husband. I'm here because he left me 20 years ago. And
Wow.
she said, and I'm still really angry, right? And so when you're saying forward movement, right? Because that's what you're saying, because there are cases that I've seen. That one was firsthand of the 20 years that she had built this anger and this wall
Yeah.
of bitterness
Yeah.
and to, and was not able to move forward and work through. And that's another thing we need to talk about. It's a work, like, as you said, like, it's work. And I also want to bring up, because the point of your affirmation reminds me also of practicing self-compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So we must practice forgiving ourselves, right? And when you said at the beginning, like, okay, I knew I should have not married this person. I was the same way. But we have to remember, when we say that, we have to say, I did do the best I could. I was only, and you know, I'm okay. Like, I forgive myself for that,
Mm-hmm.
and I work on that. Or when you go back, it's like another, like, I wish I didn't do this. Well, okay, don't beat yourself up so much, whatever you need to say. But practicing self-compassion, I think it's even researched, especially during divorce, can really help your healing.
Yeah.
So that's another component I want to bring up.
100%. And I love the work of Dr. Kristine Neff, who talks
Mm-hmm.
about self-compassion,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much related to
Yeah.
self-trust, because when you can learn to forgive yourself and give yourself that empathy and that compassion and say, you know what, yeah, I did make a
Mm-hmm.
mistake, right? But I'm not, and I'm going to stop beating myself up for it. I'm going to just acknowledge that I made a mistake. I was doing the best that I could at the time. I thought that this was the right thing for
Mm-hmm.
me, right? I thought I could make the change, whatever it was that you were thinking. But you know what? Like, I'm a different person now. What am I learning from this
Mm-hmm.
experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can I give myself some of that love? And I think, and that's really how you start to build up that trust in yourself again, when you can start to look at it and say, okay, like, there's a gift in this. Maybe I'm not seeing it right now, right? And then doing stuff for ourselves, because I think a lot of times in marriages that aren't great, we lose ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
that other person, or we lose ourselves to numbing ourselves out of it, or we're doing something that's not keeping us with ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I love talking about doing or creating a self-compassion ritual for yourself. And I like the word ritual versus a practice or a habit, because there's something really special and sacred in that word, where we're acknowledging that we deserve to have a ritual. And it doesn't have to be something that's really massive or big. It could be, taking a bath once a week, or it could be buying yourself nice fresh flowers for your
Mm-hmm.
office, or, just really enjoying that cup of tea, like, just kind of like indulging in certain things that make you feel good and
Mm-hmm.
make you feel like you deserve these things. And you slowly start to, become more empathetic with yourself, start to love yourself, and you start to trust yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
And I also find during these ritual times, so even if if it's, say, it's taking a bath for a few minutes, or maybe it's just going for a walk or doing something like that, you start to be able to tune into yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you start to listen to yourself again, right? So kind of clearing out the external noise, right? Slowing down, giving yourself some space to do something beautiful for yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of a
Super
sudden
important.
it's like, oh wait, I'm hearing my heart again, right? I'm hearing my intuition. I'm hearing that, I'm hearing the voice of God and the universe that's going to help guide me out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you start to build up that self-trust and start taking those little tiny actions to, every day towards that, and listening to that voice, right?
Yeah, which can, as you said, can be, especially at the ending of a marriage and the beginning of a divorce, can be really clouded, right?
Absolutely.
Because you have so many
Absolutely.
things going at you. So that's a really good strategy, or ritual, the self-compassion ritual. I like that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of more special than self-compassion practice, right?
Right.
Because, right, but it is, the thing about having it is making sure you keep doing it, right? Because with a lot of people I work with, it's like, are you? And they're like,
Yeah.
and it's like, you've got to continue doing these rituals, right? Like another one I do is if they're doing narrative therapy, is once they've done it, and I want them to write uninhibited when they're feeling. It's one
Mm-hmm.
tool I have. So you have to write whatever you're feeling, but after, and the ritual is you try to pick the same spot every time you do it,
Mm.
right? So I don't know, your couch or your table, or, it's probably best if you have kids, if you're getting emotional, not to do it with them around, maybe when they're
Mm-hmm.
at school or in bed or something. And then after you write it uninhibited, you give yourself a little treat.
Mm-hmm.
So it can either be,
Mm.
your bath, or depending on the time of the day, a walk or a coffee, or
Mm-hmm.
walk with a friend or something. I like that one too,
Mm-hmm.
because it works out some of those emotions that you may be feeling. So that's just one of the tips I want to give you guys as well.
Yeah, I love that. And, really it's about giving yourself permission to do that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we don't, right? It's like, well, I don't deserve that, right? Or I'm too busy, or this isn't really going to help me. Like, again, it's kind of those negative things that we start, those stories that we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, give yourself permission, allow yourself to do that, allow yourself to take the time to write and
Mm-hmm.
journal, like you're saying, right? Allow yourself to create this structure for yourself. And again, it doesn't have to be a long time. Like if the time thing is daunting, then say like, I'm going to do this
Yeah.
for 5 minutes. But it's
Yeah.
that allowing, because once you start allowing yourself to delve into some of your emotions and do some of this deep inner work,
Mm-hmm.
that's really, again, like how you start to build that self-trust, that self-love. That's how you start to move forward in your life. And so not allowing that is really doing a disservice for yourself. And it's part of that compassion that you were saying
Mm-hmm.
too, right? We're allowing ourselves to do this, and
Mm-hmm.
we're relearning,
Relearning. Yeah.
right?
Good
To put
word.
ourselves first, to put our, and not from a selfish perspective, but from like, I need to heal perspective. Like I need to figure this out perspective, because otherwise I'm not going to be doing what I'm really meant to be doing. I'm not going to be able to be the best mother or father, or the best team member, or the best business owner, or whatever it is that is in your life that's
Mm-hmm.
important to you. So it's really critical to put yourself first and provide yourself the self-compassion. Like nobody else will, right? Like other people can give
Mm-hmm.
you compassion and empathy and love and all this validation that you need, but it's like, we all know that, right? At the end of the day, if you don't love yourself, then that doesn't really matter what other people are saying or doing for you.
Well, that's what Kristine Neff would say, right? Is treat yourself like your best friend,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we don't
100%.
we don't do that. We beat ourselves up so much, and with the stigma of divorce still, that's still there. Um, we can really beat ourselves up badly,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
treating yourself like your best friend, being kind to yourself, right? Because another thing is Dr. Kristine Neff also says, there's so many people that are suffering, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you're at the beginning of the divorce process, you're like, oh, you can be like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm struggling, it's just me. Meanwhile, like, look at the divorce rates, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not alone, right? Like, there's, I think it's what, 52 or 54 in the States, and I don't know what Canada's, like 40 something percent. And um,
Yeah.
I don't know about Europe, it's all over, but divorce is common, and you're not alone,
Mm-hmm.
even though it can feel alone. Like, each divorce is unique
Yeah.
journey, but there is help out there if you want it, like through you and me and others. I would have thought it was, having you or I during my divorce would have been
Mm-hmm.
invaluable, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting, even though logically we know that other people are getting divorced and the divorce rate is high, I can't
Mm-hmm.
be the only one going through
Mm-hmm.
this. I hear it all the time. Almost every single one of my clients
Mm-hmm.
says to me, I feel like I'm the only one going
Mm-hmm.
through this. And it's like, oh my goodness, like it breaks my heart, right? Because I don't love when people feel alone. Like I don't want people to feel alone. That's why I do
Mm-hmm.
this work. And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
do group stuff, right? Because like, let's bring people together,
Right.
and not from a perspective of like, we're just going to sit here and complain about our lives, but from a perspective of we're here to support each other, learn from each other, know that we're not alone, and we're going to like work through this together, right? We're going to move through this. We're going to move forward through this, and you're not alone, right? And you're right. Every situation is unique,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some things that not everyone's experiencing, but there's always empathy, and there's always shared compassion and wisdom and learning that comes from surrounding yourself with other people who also are learning about themselves and
Mm-hmm.
are looking to take responsibility for their lives and are really wanting to move forward in a really healthy, positive way.
Yeah. I also want to mention too that the necessity of having support
Mm-hmm.
systems, because, and the right support
Yeah.
systems, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have, as I said to you before, we talked about, the Facebook groups, okay, for certain things, but I prefer that they get the right, surround themselves with the right type of peers,
Right.
right? Not, right, like, yeah, you can have an angry session together, but then you're moving forward too, right? At least you're trying to make steps to move forward. Because one of the things that I've done for death loss and non-death loss too is surrounding yourself with the right professionals, the right peers, the right friends and family. But as we talked about a lot today, in you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to do the work.
Yeah.
A lot of people, even if they've been divorced, they can support you, right? Like, but it's still, you have to be as you said, it's the choice, right? You have to. But I also want them to know, like you guys to know, that it does work, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like this does work, right?
Oh, it does work, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look at you and I, right? We're both on the other end of it, right? For
Mm-hmm.
many
Yeah.
years. And that deep inner work is so worth it, even though, it can be very challenging, right? It's
Yeah.
not easy work. It's not easy to be honest with yourself. It's not easy to do the journaling and to take the time to do that and to really like acknowledge the part that you played. And it's not easy to move forward either, because sometimes it can just be like, I'm just going to stay where I am because it's quote unquote, it just is easier and it just feels more comfortable. But we
Mm-hmm.
know that that's not the right place to be. But it's so worth it, right? I mean, I have so many gifts from my divorce that happened to me. Yes, it wasn't a great time. It was terrible. It was a dark time in my life, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But when I look at all the gifts that came to me from that, all the stuff that I started learning about myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff that I started unraveling, all the tools that I started developing and learning about and creating, and that now I get to share with
Mm-hmm.
others, right? So that we can accelerate that process or support the process better. And at the end of the day, I just feel like this was the right decision. I've learned so much about myself. I can now help other people. It's opened up new doors for me. I've met so many wonderful people in my life that I never would have had a chance to meet.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely know how to tune into my intuition, right? I definitely know what's important to me, because that was the start of that. Like, I was like, I don't want to ever be here again. I don't want to be in the point where I don't know who I am anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it
Mm-hmm.
started me building those practices and those rituals and those habits that really set the foundation for me moving forward, because I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be here. I don't want to go through that again. Like, I really want to know who I am,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can, because it helps equip you with other things that go on in your life. I mean, let's face it, life's a series of challenges, right? There's other
Mm-hmm.
things that life's going to throw at you. And for me, it was like a year after I got fired. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh my,
Yeah.
wow, was not expecting that. The really beautiful thing was that I was already doing a lot of this work and I had so
Mm-hmm.
many tools already. And I was like, okay, right, I'm going to put these tools to
Mm-hmm.
practice,
Mm-hmm.
and in other things that have happened in my life, right? So it's constantly building those tools and strategies to get us out of these situations, to help us go through challenges, to help us build a life that we
Mm-hmm.
really want to live and that we
Mm-hmm.
deserve to live, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that, it's kind of like rebuilding your life. Like if you look at bricks, right? It may look a little different, but it can be just as great, or it's probably going to be
Yeah,
better, right? Right. That's
definitely.
another thing. It's going to be better. When you're in it, it may not feel like it,
Mm-hmm.
but after it is better. And
Yeah.
I love what you say too, as we wrap up, is that you finally get to know yourself again,
Mm-hmm.
right? You rediscover as yourself, because you've lost yourself from your young, but you also get to rediscover some new things about yourself, right? And
Yeah.
that's even me. I'm thinking the same thing. Like, I'm like, here I do lives all the time. Like, if I had think 7, 8 years ago, there's no way I would have thought I could do any of this,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's incredible how we have to visualize it as one chapter of our life, and as you go through it, you're writing your own chapter.
Yeah.
So
A
yeah.
100%.
Did anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I agree with you, right? Like, I think there's always a silver lining. There's always a lesson. It always
Mm-hmm.
turns out way better. And you do have the choice, right? You do have the authority over your life to make those decisions, even though there's lots of really negative scary, hard things happening around you, you can get through it. And there is lots of support out there. There's other people that can help you. And so reach out for help. Like, I think that's the most important thing too, is like, ask for help, right? Be vulnerable, really do that deep inner work, give yourself that time and space to, you know, have these rituals for yourself where you can really give yourself permission to love yourself. Because ultimately that's what's going to, you know, carry you forward, is that knowledge that I love myself. I can create this life for myself. I get to decide how I want to show up every day. And little by little, you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, like look where I'm at right now. And I'm so proud of myself. So
yeah, this was a wonderful conversation. If anyone has any questions, just put them in the comment. Otherwise, Vera, do you have anything you want to tell people about, like what you're up to?
Well,
is there anything that you want to tell people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for, you know, again, how I can help more people that are going through major life change like a divorce. So please reach out. My website is createyourbestchapter.com. So all the information's on there. But I love helping people do this because we need people who feel good about themselves, who are energized, who are creating a positive impact on the world. I mean, the world needs that, right? So you can be part of that, and we're here to help you. And I really, really enjoyed this conversation as well, Karen, and really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it was a pleasure as always. I do one more thing. You do have support groups, and I really like that. So if you do have support groups, so that would be,
I kind of have these groups that kind of roll through the years. So again, all the information on my website, createyourbestchapter.com, and we'll have some new cohorts coming up in 2025, which should be really amazing.
Awesome. That's important stuff. So anyways, thanks for coming on, and take care, everybody. And we'll see you again.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.